All right, so this is part 2 of solving quadratics. The first part was solving using square roots and completing the square. And we're going to go over how to solve quadratics using the quadratic formula. And this is our quadratic formula. You're probably familiar with that. You've seen it before. So how do we do that? A reminder to set everything equal to 0. So that means make it look like this first. Put it in standard form and set it equal to 0. Your a, b, and c are your coefficients. They will be then plugged in to your quadratic formula. You're going to then simplify everything underneath the radical. And then, if you can, continue to simplify so you have one answer using the plus sign and one with a minus sign. Sometimes you will not be able to do that. You'll see that here in a second. And then just simplify it as best you can. So let's do this. Now here, the nice thing about the quadratic formula is if you're not sure what method to use, it always works. The quadratic formula always works. There are obviously faster ones for certain things, but this one will always work. Okay, so I'm going to set this equal to 0, so that means I need to subtract 27 from both sides. Okay, that is not a great 0, so there we go. All right, now I'm going to use the quadratic formula. Again, notice this says the opposite of b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a, okay? And again, I think of that as the opposite of b there to start. So if it's positive, I write negative. If it's negative, I write positive. So here we go. X equals opposite of b. b is negative 6, so I'm going to write positive 6 plus or minus the square root. Okay, now here you want everything else to go in parentheses. So b squared. b is negative 6, so I have to put that negative in the parentheses or my answer will be wrong. Make sure that that happens. Minus 4 times a. There's nothing in front here, so a is really 1 times c. Don't forget that negative 27. All over 2 times a, which again was 1. Okay, now I'm going to use my calculator and I'm going to simplify just this part. I'm going to type into my calculator. Okay, so let's do that right now. Okay, again, just type it in just like you had it. Negative 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 27. Okay, we get 144. I guess I switched colors, that's okay. So I'm going to write x equals 6 plus or minus the square root. I still have that square root, but now this whole thing has become 144 over, I may as well go ahead and simplify that too, over 2. Okay, so now I'm going to move over here. We have x equals 6 plus or minus the square root of 144. Now notice this plus or minus is already put in there for us, so I don't have to write plus or minus. I know my two answers are 12 and negative 12, but that plus or minus has taken care of it for us. Okay, so now I've got this. So now what I want to do is I have two answers. I have 6 plus 12 divided by 2, and my other answer would be 6 minus 12 divided by 2. So I have to figure out what those are. So make sure you simplify the top first, then divide it by 2. So that would be 18 divided by 2, which is going to give me 9. Okay, so this is 9. Okay, and then my other answer, maybe I'll actually just write it up here, is going to be 6 minus 12 is negative 6, divided by 2 is negative 3. So these are my two answers. And there we go. Okay, that's how you use the quadratic formula. Again, the quadratic formula always works. Okay, so that was a little bit easier one. Most of the time, a lot of the times when you use the quadratic formula, you will not get two nice answers. So then what? Well, let's try one. Here we go. I've got This, I want to move everything to one side. Oh, nice. It already is. I've already got a 0 here. It's in standard form. We're good. So now I'm just going to follow my quadratic formula. So x equals opposite of b. Okay, so this is going to be positive 8. Now, if this was positive, then you would write negative, right? So just make sure you're watching that. Okay, b squared, so negative 8 squared minus 4 times a times c. All over 2 times a. Okay. I'm going to simplify what's underneath the radical. So let's type that into our calculator. We have negative 8. Okay, negative 8 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 17. Ooh, I get 268. Okay. Okay. Now I'm going to solve that. Okay, well, 268, if I try to break that down, it will not be a nice number. So you're going to have to do some breaking apart. Now, if you do that, you would get this, okay, which would give me 2 root 67. Okay, so now you guys are familiar with that already, so I won't go into how that works. So I have 2 root 67 over 6. Okay, now, when you simplify and break that radical apart, sometimes this answer I can't really go too much further, but there is something I can do. You always want to double check to see if there's a number that will go into these 3 numbers right here, okay? Now it has to go into all 3, not just 2 of them, all 3 of them. Now you'll notice 2 goes into all of those, right? So I'm going to reduce this by reducing each of those divided by 2. So 8 divided by 2 is 4. 2 divided by 2 is 1, so I don't need to write a 1 in front of the square root of 67. I'm just going to write that. And then 6 divided by 2 is 3. So this, you can just leave your answer right there if you get that situation. Now, sometimes you might have an I in here as well. So again, if that's the case, just leave it, but make sure those 3 things that I circled in purple are simplified, okay? And so my answer would be 6 plus the square root of 67 divided by 3, and 6 minus the square root of 67 divided by 3. But we can just leave it like that. That's considered good form. Okay. All right, so now you know how to do all the other kinds of solving quadratics. You should know how to do all 5 now. Write this into your planner, and then go ahead and do that. Put it in your planner in the appropriate spot, and then check it off when you turn it in. All right, see ya. Bye.